Hello, I'm Richard Gerver, and I thought I'd spend a little while making this little film for you to explain a little bit about where it all began for me as head teacher of the Grange Primary School in Long Eaton. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we did there because it seems it's so long ago now. Many people may have forgotten, may never even have heard of us. There's so much I could have said, but I thought in order to keep the film relatively brief and hopefully interesting, I thought I'd tell you about two elements of what we developed at Grange and why we developed those things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Grange University, but before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Grangetown itself, the project, and how it came about. So this is Grange here. I first came across this school in 2001. At the time, I was working for a local authority, developing and designing programs specifically to remotivate demotivated boys in reading and writing. And I turned up one day here at this school to try and persuade them to get involved in our project. Anyway, to cut a very, very long story short, I fell in love. I fell in love with the school. I fell in love with the community. I fell in love with the students and the staff. And there was just something about this place that I don't know, exuded a kind of a magic, an opportunity, which was interesting because it was a school that was seriously struggling. It was in the bottom 5% of performing schools in the UK. Anyway, I don't know what it was. I applied for the job. To cut another very long story short, I ended up getting the headship. I was only, I think, 31 at the time. And it wasn't because I was particularly talented or particularly brilliant or any of those things. I got the job because it turns out that everybody else in the community knew how bad this school was, and none of the other appropriate candidates wanted it. So there I was. I found myself head of this wonderful primary school. Just to give you a bit of context, the school had just under 500 students. It had been struggling habitually pretty much for 10 years. It had had a number of previous head teachers in that time. And so it was, there was something about the place that needed to be improved, let's put it that way. Anyway, I turned up, and on my first day as a head, I remember my first meeting distinctly. I was terrified. You know, I'd got over the kind of ego joy of being given my first headship, the excitement of what that meant. And suddenly I realized that everybody in and around that building, in and around that community, was waiting for me to tell them what to do. And of course, one of the things we all know about leadership is not about telling people what they need to do. It's about helping a community build a vision and then empowering people to do stuff for themselves. And that's really where I want to start here. Our first job during my tenure at Grange was to work out what our vision was. And we did that in a number of ways, but to cut it very quickly here for you today, for 10 years, the school had been reacting to. It had had numerous consultants and advisors and government people and Ofsted and all the rest of it coming into their school, telling them what they should do. And as a result, they were drowning in a pile of new initiatives, new ideas, some of them well-meaning, some of them pretty good, but just hundreds of them from all over the place. And one of the really interesting things was they tried to adopt them all because the point was, despite the fact the school was failing, the people in that school really, really cared. And so they tried everything. But the problem is every time they tried another great new initiative from on high, it was like pouring concrete over the vision and values and sense of purpose for that school. And one of the things I've learned many years later about vision and values is they have to come from you. They have to come from here. They have to be unique to your circumstance and your context. It's why we should never judge other schools if they do things differently, as long as they work. You know, there are critical questions we can ask. And the most fundamental of them is, do you know your students? Do you know what they need? What are you going to do to meet that need? And ultimately, how can you prove that what you've done has worked? And as long as you can cycle through that series of questions, in a way, that's all you need to think about. So the vision needs to come from that. Now at Grange, we wanted to start right back at the beginning. And that was by asking one fundamental question. And that question was, what do we want our children to look like as human beings when they leave our school? In other words, how could people in the community identify that our kids had been Grange students from their behaviors, their outlook, their knowledge, their attributes, their skills? What was unique about a Grange student? The second thing we wanted to do was create a dynamic and exciting environment. So at that first meeting, and by the way, most of the staff thought I was crazy when I said what I said next. I asked them a question, and I guess this was my personal contribution to the vision. And that question was this: how do we turn our school into somewhere as exciting as Disneyland? So we had a clarity of purpose and we had a vision about what we were going to achieve. From there, we created a cycle of learning, which was personal to us, to our community, in a way to respond to the challenge we'd set ourselves. Let me share that with you now, because the best way I can do it is to show you this, our cycle of learning. Now you'll notice from the start, on the cycle of learning, there are 3 words, and those 3 words were our vision statement: living, learning, laughing. The idea being that we wanted our school to be rich in a celebration of possibility. You see, Grange was in a relatively challenging community, and we needed to help our children to aspire. And in order to help them aspire, we needed to first make sure they could dream. And that was giving them the opportunities to experience the kind of things that kids in that community were never going to experience. By doing that, we wanted to drive this idea of the power of learning at the very heart of our community. It's the middle word of the 3 for a reason, because everything stems from that. You first of all help children understand the potential for their lives. You then help them understand the power and need for learning to make that happen. And then finally, the third word's laughter. Because for me, and I'm passionate about this, a school has to be a place where people want to be, where they are comfortable and relaxed enough to be able to laugh. Because if they're comfortable and relaxed and they're in an environment of psychological safety, they will learn better. It's that simple. And so we created this cycle of learning. And let me try and talk you through it. First and foremost, going back to the first word, for us, Grange was an environment where we wanted to celebrate the opportunities to learn and live, and how you did that together in harmony, in partnership. In order to do that, we needed to be committed to developing in our children skills and competencies and knowledge and all of the things that is rich about the purpose of a curriculum. In order to do that, we felt very passionate that we wanted to make sure that we applied as much of that learning as we could in context and experience. Because the one thing you know about children is that learning is transitory, no matter how clever you try and wrap it, unless you make the learning matter. And it can't matter just because it's heading towards an exam grade or a test. You actually have to connect learning to children's lives and then broaden it from there. You have to create a hook, a foundation, a purpose, a value for that learning. You know, in so many ways, my inspiration has always come from, and I've never worked in one, but it has always come from the best run early years units I've been lucky enough to visit and be part of in a wider school community. Because for me, the genius of a well-run early years unit is they take really complex concepts and they drill down into deep opportunities for contextualized and experiential learning, which really hook and matter. And most importantly, turn those concepts into something pragmatic and practical, something students can utilize immediately. In other words, it's taking information and turning into knowledge, because of course knowledge is pragmatic. It isn't fixed, and it isn't something that sits in your head. It's only knowledge if it becomes practical to you. Now that brings us to the fourth part of the cycle. And the fourth part of the cycle was really, what was the purpose of what we were doing? And that was to raise in our children a sense of aspiration and value. We wanted to help them understand their place in the world, their value in the world, how their skills and knowledge and interests and passions could help not only drive their own lives forward, but could make the lives better for the people around them. Because again, going back to what I said a minute ago, if you create aspiration and value in your students, they will want to connect to the learning more. They will understand the power of living their life and the connection to learning to the maximum. So that was our cycle of learning. The other thing we wanted to do when we were talking about the student profile, this idea of what we wanted our kids to look like when they leave us, was some research I found a number of years before I took over at Grange. And that was looking at the traits of greatness, or in other words, what it takes to be successful. And I've always been captured by these things. I've always been captured by the idea that there are qualities which we need to develop in every single one of us in order to be successful. So here they are. I'm not going to read them to you, but for me, it's very straightforward. It's very clear that these are the qualities we need to make explicit in what we do in our schools. You know, we hear so much, so often about the divide between the state sector and the private sector. Well, in many ways, for me, and I was educated in the private sector and taught my whole career in the state sector, the difference is this absolute laser-like focus on the development of the whole child, the whole person, the characteristics and behaviors you need to have, as well as the knowledge and skills. It's those focus on attributes. So that became something very powerful to what we wanted to do at Grange. Now that's a very quick introduction to what was a very long, very considered, very researched process. But what I'm going to do now is introduce to you the first of the concepts that generated from that process. And that was the Grangetown project. And rather than tell you about it, I'm going to show you a short film. I hope you enjoy it.
Our school's like a town which we run ourselves. That's hot management. Meet our head teacher, Richard Gerver from Grange Primary in Long Eaton, Derbyshire. He turned our failing school into a really exciting one. He gave us a TV studio, cafe, shop and museum. How did he get the idea for a town?
Why should the school not be as exciting as Disneyland? Why should children on a cold February morning, when they've got the sniffles, opt to come to school rather than stay at home?
Richard's hot management idea allows us to see why we're learning, and it's just like a real town with an elected mayor.
Hi, my name is Beth. I'm 11 years old and I'm the mayor of Grangetown.
Grangetown runs whenever possible every week of the school year. It's run by a management team of pupils who apply for their jobs. In the language cafe we practice our French.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Bonjour.
We got professional training in customer service.
Qu'est-ce que vous prenez?
Je voudrais un muffin, s'il vous plaît. Je voudrais un croissant.
Hello, I'm Georgie. I'm 11 years old and I work as head waitress for the language cafe. Not a lot of people our age get to work in a cafe, but we do, and it's really good.
In the shop we order the stock and do mental maths.
There's you need to bring us everything. Thank you. My name is India and I'm 8 years old and I run the Grangetown shop. I'm really good at maths and I like working with money. There you go. Thank you.
The school museum got help from the local museum. It's used for displays and reenactments. At the TV and radio station we were given media training from the local BBC.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, and they actually remembered all the names.
Yeah, it needed a bit more practicing.
We present and edit our own radio programmes played out every break time.
The 4 presenters write the scripts, which is myself and 3 of my other classmates.
3, 2, 1.
Listening to that interview makes me feel really excited about seeing the Annie production on Monday. I hear they've all worked really, really hard.
Good luck to everyone who's in Annie. Break a leg, as they say.
When Richard Gerver arrived at Grange Primary, the school had been without a head for 18 months and had lost its way.
In terms of county perspective, Grange was pretty much near the bottom of the pile, and when you think there are over 400 schools in Derbyshire, that's pretty low.
Richard's hot management idea has improved our Panda results from E-star to A-star.
What I think we've proved is that to follow a curriculum that the government felt was suitable for all doesn't work, because every child, every community is different, and we need to be able to really personalise the agenda.
It's not just learning, it's enjoying yourself as well.
Our school motto is living, learning and laughing. We have to ensure that those 3 things are covered within everything that we do. So, that was the Grange Story as told by Teachers TV in 2003. It seems a lifetime ago. And I have to tell you that some of those kids have gone on to achieve remarkable things in their lives. I think a great source of pride for me is the number of them that have actually gone on into teaching. Some have rocked the world, broken glass ceilings, particularly for kids in the community in and around Grange. So it's been wondrous to track their process. But the Grangetown project, which was our foundational part, because we wanted to start with something that felt extracurricular so that we had time and space to develop it without the pressures of the other stuff that was around us. The thing was, it became so deeply ingrained in our culture so quickly. It both boosted our children's outcomes and the entire sense of value in our school, but it also boosted the self-confidence of our community, which meant we could stretch it further and bigger and dream more. And that's where we went next. Now, today, I'm not going to talk about the way we redesigned curriculum in totality. Maybe I'll make another film for that. And if you'd like that, then message me and I'll put together a film specifically about the broader curricular offer that we developed at Grange, which was around core themes and core competencies and core knowledge. So if you're interested in that, maybe I'll put together another presentation for you. But I want to jump on to the other thing that was really important in our development, the third stage of our development, and that was this. You know, for kids in our community, university really wasn't for them, it was for posh people. And again, this whole point about raising aspiration and value and connecting learning to the world was vital to us in the way it had been with the Grangetown project. So what we decided to do was bring the university to our children. Now, in those days, we had huge amounts of flexibility and opportunity. Many, sadly, don't have that now. So I know this would be much tougher to put together. Besides which, I'm not even sharing this presentation to tell you how it should be. I'm sharing it really to give you a bit of an understanding into my background and my passion for education as it started in 1992 as a young teacher, went through my iterations as a teacher into middle management, senior leadership, and ultimately headship. So the next stage, that third stage, was this idea of how do we bring a university into a primary school? And at around that time, I'd been doing some work and found out about what Pixar were developing in some of their earliest years. You know, this idea that they were developing a university where their employees would go off once a week to explore an area of personal interest that they could then use to harness their own ideas of development and progress and process. And I was captured by this, and I thought, that's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a university on Friday mornings in our school where our students get the opportunity to choose themselves from a whole range of different courses what they'd like to study. And at the end of each course, they qualify, they graduate that course. We start to build them each a career entry profile, which is where all the qualifications from all the different courses they do through their careers at the school accrue. Now, the courses were run by teachers, teaching assistants, other members of staff, parents who were suitably checked and had something really exciting to talk about and to offer, and also expertise from within the community. And let me share some of those examples with you now. This is just a small chunk of the courses that were available to our kids at the university. So there's everything there from money management, you'll notice, which was run by a local internet bank who don't exist anymore, Egg. They came in and ran really great money management courses. There's cheerleading, contemporary dance, which was run by the New English Contemporary Ballet Company, who would come in every week free and run dance courses. There's chess, there's all kinds of different options and spins on science, beauty therapy. Remember, these are primary children. Now, what this did was broaden their palette and understanding of what was possible, both in their communities and in their lives. The whole thing really was designed to wrap and build their sense and level of aspiration. I know this has been a whistle stop for you, and I apologize, but I wanted to keep it brief and punchy. Suffice to say, within actually 2 years of us starting the Grangetown project and then evolving the curriculum into the university, our children performed miraculously in any measure you wanted to put them against. They went academically in outcomes from the bottom 5% of performing schools to the top 5% in under 2 years. The school went through 2 outstanding Ofsted inspections, and we also had a government-driven research project into the school, why it had worked and how it had worked, which they asked Cambridge University to carry out, which again was an extraordinary experience for all of us. See, the point is, innovation, development doesn't take one methodology. There isn't one scientific answer. There isn't one solution to how you create education that really matters for the children in your care. And I'd like to finish where I started. Remember, it's about, do we know our children? Do we know what they need? What are we doing to meet that need? How do we prove it? If you'd like more information on my philosophy around education, but maybe more importantly about the Grange Story, and in the book Creating Tomorrow's Schools Today, which was my first book, it gives a much more in-depth look at how we turned philosophy into practice. And it also explains how we developed, designed, planned, ran, and assessed the entire curricular experience. Well, I hope this has been of value. I hope it's been of interest. Listen, stay in touch, let me know. And I look forward to speaking to you again sometime in the future. Take care.